Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz, and I wanted to do a presentation on the sovereignty of the heart, and in particular, how to heal ourselves from emotional and mental colonizers, because sometimes we're not aware of them, and we are guided so that we could see how at times we are not expressing our feelings, but we are pressured to carry the feelings and thoughts of others. So let me begin. The feel to heal trap. Modern wellness movement has weaponized a beautiful intuition. Feel to heal. While feeling is indeed a necessary doorway, it is not the whole house. And we're told that the only path to restoration or healing is to surrender every internal boundary and lean into every sensation. We're often being invited into a subtle form of brainwashing. This movement frequently ignores a violent reality. Our inner worlds are often trespassed upon by the demands of others. If you studied emotional blackmail, if you studied brainwashing, mental abuse, you probably understand what I am referring to. If not, I would encourage you to take some lessons. Maybe Susan Forward on emotional blackmail. I like the book. There are others, that talk about also mental abuse and how at times we don't recognize the abuser from the victim. And I see that a lot. Like we will assume the abuser is a good person and then the victim is the bad person. And this just happens because either we're not aware or we want to belong. And so then we kind of just move in to belong. But I'm going to give some examples. You may find yourself exhausted and colonized, not because you're overthinking, but you're being pressured to identify with emotions that are not your own. True healing requires the reclamation of your emotional autonomy, moving from being a subject of someone else's narrative to becoming the sovereign guardian of your own conscience. Not every feeling in your body belongs to you. I don't know if you're aware of that. That's why the whole issue of the feel movement does not recognize that. And it seems like they assume like if you feel your feeling, therefore, you're gonna heal. But what others say is that not every feeling in your body actually belongs to you. So you should write down the feelings. Don't immediately take ownership of them. Write them down, and then you'll have to process them and identify, are these my feelings or are they not? A primary pitfall of contemporary healing culture is the dangerous assumption that every sensation you experience is sacred data or a signal of truth. In reality, we're often emotionally attacked, mentally attacked, pressured to internalize feelings and thoughts that belong to others so that they can maintain their own power and role. It could be like a healer, it could be whatever roles of power that they carry or status. So you're asked to carry feelings, to carry thoughts that are not your own, so that you can validate them. If you treat every feeling and thought as an inherent truth, you risk nurturing abuse. Some feelings are not yours. They are trauma responses, old survival strategies, the heavy weight of emotional garbage dumped on you by those who demand you feel a certain way just to belong. Often one is asked to internalize other people's feelings as their own. So feel to heal can accidentally reinforce emotional diminishment. The missing step of emotional differentiation. Before you attempt to process an emotion, you must perform an act of defiance through differentiation. This is why when I was writing, I wrote in my books that journaling, begin the process of journaling. But what happened is people took that and they went online and they started fixing others instead of writing down their thoughts and their feelings. And then again, like I mentioned in the book, it's anger. It's something about anger. It was I don't have it with me right now, but it's about anger, and it gave that whole log of questions you should ask and how to note your feelings, your thoughts, the events, the objective data around the thoughts and the events, but don't process them down. Now you're just noting them. And then at a certain time, when you're in a different state of mind, you go and you process these same thoughts so you create a log. And here you are trying to create an emotional differentiation. Other people took that and they went online and they started fixing every single person except themselves. So before you attempt to process an emotion, you must perform an act of defiance through differentiation. Most Feel to Heal programs will not respect your boundaries when those boundaries become inconvenient for them. Refusing to be emotionally colonized is an act of bravery. I have faced psychologists who, if you tell them you don't feel a certain way, they will prescribe you as mentally ill or having a disorder. So you are pressured to feel and think a certain way. Or they'll psychoanalyze you with certain disorders because, again, you don't fit their profile of what is normal. So you have to get into what is normal. Also, you have to write that down, not from your perception, but what is your message? What is your value system? Write down what is considered normal that you agree to, so that you can have some way to make like a benchmark to measure yourself by. When you start looking at the log and you look at your emotions and your thoughts, you say, whose emotion is this? Is it mine? Am I carrying it for someone who's pressuring me? Am I performing this feeling to validate someone else's role? You must be willing to state clearly, this feeling isn't mine. And I'm not responsible for managing your emotional state. Coercion is not an excuse for losing your moral compass. Struggle for sovereignty of conscience is timeless. Sovereignty of our heart, our emotions, this is timeless. It's not just happened in this day and age. And so I gave the example, consider the magicians in Pharaoh's court. They were not always symbols of defiance. They initially negotiated for rewards, tempted by the promise of status with the Pharaoh. This is based on some scholarly commentary. When they realized they were trapped by Pharaoh's tyranny and compelled by law to continue their performance, again, this is how they catch you, idea of belonging and feeling to be part of the circle. They reached, they were kind of imprisoned and compelled to support his tyrannical society. Even under the threat of death, they reclaimed their moral agency, though. And this illustrates a harsh truth. While power imbalances and manipulation are real, they do not erase an individual accountability. You may be pressured, brainwashed, or compelled, but you still have it within you to possess the inherent power to align yourself with the truth. Coercion is not, an indefinite prison, but it is, excuse me, coercion is a prison, but it's not an indefinite prison. It is not also a justification for the abandonment of your integrity. So that's why you have to process your thoughts. You have to look at a benchmark. And here the benchmark is Moses. Now, they didn't, of course, know Moses before this, but once they saw Moses upon him peace, they had to check their behavior, their argument with Moses, his argument, his character, and they were able again to break out of that prison. This is how God scans your heart, turns your heart, directs your path out of that prison. This is a case example of when, again, God, the turner of the hearts, director of the hearts, guides you to the straight path. So here again, they weren't seeking God, but God knows what was in their heart. He knows that they were compelled to support the Pharaoh. So that's why I don't assume everyone around the power circle accepts those who are, engaging with the power. Some may be compelled. Some may be carrying emotions, thoughts, feelings. They may be brainwashed. They may be compelled to carry emotions that are not there. So sometimes you have to use, again, a different message if your audience that you're aiming to is a different set of audience. And here, the audience, sometimes you have to speak to the magicians around the Pharaoh and get them to stand up for what is true. Sometimes you have to wage your argument against the Pharaoh himself. Sometimes it's the secret witness around Pharaoh. So again, you have to study because the Quran tells you all the different layers and how your argument has to switch depending on who the audience of your argument is. Coercion does not erase the truth. Power does not erase accountability. Beware the cloaked ego and spiritual performance. There's a specific disgrace in using cleverness to gain an advantage over others while pretending to act for a higher sake. This is the cloaked ego, a desire for control hidden behind the mask of religiosity or healing expertise. These individuals, they purchase the worldly life, their reputation as a guru, an empath, at the expense of the truth. Now, I mentioned a different article before. It was an article on understanding the shadow healer. And I was trying to promote humility, and people took it in the wrong way of you're promoting, what do you call it? You're promoting like a different, or you're like, you left Islam or something. I was referring to, you can still see truth in books and writings. If you are reflecting on the Quran, you can still see kind of parts of truth here and there, and you can use that to engage people in conversation. So you don't have to come in with this kind of black and white mentality where I'm 100% against you, and and you have nothing of truth that you're carrying. You can hear the truth in other people, and you hear me say like the aha moment, and you can engage people using that truth that they carry. If you're listening, you're not just trying to respond and knock them out. If you're listening, you can hear some of that truth, and then you can take that truth and use that as the starting point for the conversation. Here we're talking about the cloaked ego. And this exists throughout. I mentioned, a Samiri more than once. It's the individual who uses cleverness to gain advantage over others. Here he gained advantage over Harun, a prophet of God, upon him peace, pretending to act for a higher sake. This is, again, the cloaked ego, a desire for control hidden behind the mask of religiosity or healing expertise. These individuals purchase the worldly life, their reputation, at the expense of truth. And we see that across all religions. So we have to be mindful, and God gives us a clear example in the Quran of such an individual more than once. in these toxic dynamics, you're often accused of spiritual bypassing. So I don't, as I said before, more than once, I do not buy into the spiritual bypassing phenomena that people follow. If you refuse to absorb feelings assigned to you, that is healthy. Don't accept feelings, because as a Palestinian, we're always told to worry about the feelings that of Israelis and how they feel insecure and they feel fear and they feel this and so it becomes like kind of like you're this garbage dump for everybody's feelings, and anytime you try to express your feeling, you're shut down. So don't be fooled. This accusation is usually a defense mechanism used by the colonizer because you are refusing to play the role they need you to play to make them feel wise, special, peacemaker, whatever it is. You don't owe anyone a performance of your inner world to make them feel spiritually, mentally, politically useful. You're allowed to say your interpretation of my inner world is not accurate. Victory happens in the heart before the world. I mentioned this more than once, that truth, for it to manifest in the world, it has to first manifest and gain power in your heart. If in your hearts truth does not gain power, then you cannot bring it out into the world, because you can only give what you carry. You can't give something that you are not carrying. So material victory over tyranny never manifests into the world until it has manifested and taken over the heart and the conscience and the emotions. This is why you got to be careful about the feeling trap. So unless truth has taken over the conscience, just like with the magicians, unless it has taken over, it will not manifest into the world. Material victory over tyranny never manifests until the truth has first overcome falsehood within the individual conscience. There's a fundamental difference between ornamental faith and faith established in the heart. And I say this because a lot of times people explain, why do you educate? Why do you educate? It's because that's how you promote justice in the world. That's how it comes, that material victory. You have to promote truth over falsehood. You can't allow falsehood to keep, becoming, colonizing people's minds, colonizing people's emotions, colonizing people's hearts. You have to educate so people can make correct decision, which is to throw everything out from the garbage dump that they have made themselves into and just throw it out. You have to do that. Ornamental faith is a superficial decoration. You go on stage, and here's again where I'm talking about where my discussion on hijab also was misconstrued. It's not about just saying, all the sayings of the prophet and saying the Quran. It's like God scans your heart. The material world reflects the hearts of people. The material world reflects the hearts of people. So you have to push back to ensure that people dump the garbage out. Ornamental faith lacks a way to confront real material power and easily collapses under the pressure of the world. However, true faith takes hold of the sensory organs of the body, must be established in the heart first, because once the truth has conquered the inner world, it possesses a reality that eventually rises to manifest in the physical realm. You cannot defeat the pharaohs of the world until you have defeated them, the falsehood within your own heart, your own emotion, your own thought, your own being. The journey begins there. Begins in your conscience. You have to defeat them there. That's why the secret witness represents your conscience. So God is telling us you have to defeat the Pharaoh at the level of conscience. You have to defeat the Pharaoh at the level of the heart. You have to defeat the Pharaoh at the level of the emotions. So all of these pharaohs that are already raging within you, they have to be defeated first in the level of the unseen before they can manifest in the level of the seen. Are you an invited guest or a colonizer? The human heart is a sacred space. Conscience is a sacred space. Your emotions are also sacred. Your thoughts also, but you have to recognize what is yours and what is the whispers of Satan, or what is, the thoughts of the colonizer. You have to recognize and you have to process. So when you're doing, journaling in the Quran, you're not looking for verses to make videos to appear smart and wise and, get on stage. If you haven't walked through that process yourself, looking at your own thoughts, your own feelings, you shouldn't really be making videos telling people about how to think and how to feel and what's normal think and because a lot of oppression and abuse happens by individuals who think their intention is good, and they don't really know that they've never really processed it, and they're not aware that they're actually enabling oppressors and abusers with what they are selling. So much like the highest heavens, entry is by invitation only into the human heart and conscience. We do not colonize our way to the divine, and we must not colonize our way into the hearts of others, their emotions, their thoughts. If you want to know what someone thinks or feels, you ask them directly. If they say, I don't wish to share that with you, you respect that and you don't ask again. If they wish to invite you, they will invite you and tell you, this is what I think and this is what I feel. Emotional colonization is the act of claiming to know someone's feelings, conscience, thoughts better than they do, or demanding they carry your emotional, mental, whatever garbage to validate your role and whatever that role is. It could be a healer, because I mentioned in the past about the shadow healer, but it could be others. So the question here is, ask yourself, did you ever process your own thoughts and feelings? Because unprocessed thoughts and feelings at times could be you're carrying garbage from others, like the magicians were, and you're just pouring them onto other people, and you're thinking because you're carrying all this garbage and you belong, that other people should carry this garbage too, and so that they can belong like you. And you're not getting that. You never process your thoughts to recognize if you should actually be throwing out the garbage. If God himself requires an invitation for his sacred space, no human has the right to invade yours. Here I'm talking about heaven. As you navigate your journey, remember that you are the gatekeeper of your own heart, your own conscience, your own emotions, and your own thoughts. So you have to process them. Again, what's yours, what's not yours, and you have to note them down for your own process. And this has to be private. It's not a show and tell. And the audience, again, to develop fear of God, the audience has to be God and God alone, because God, you cannot see him, but by recognizing you cannot see him, you can also recognize privately you can't project. You're speaking to God, but you can't project. Here you are being as honest and as acknowledging what comes through your emotions as much as possible. And then when you go read the Quran, you start to see the benchmarks that God places before you. Here is the person, here's Moses facing the Pharaoh. Here's, in Surah Yasin, here's the man who came from the faraway, city running. And so you start to see, and then from there, as you're processing your thoughts and you're reading the Quran, God tells you, this is not the right thought. This is not the right feeling. And he helps you, again, to walk out of whatever prison you're in, if you're in prison, or he helps you to throw out the garbage if you're carrying garbage. So is in your relationships and in your healings, ask yourself, am I an invited guest or an emotional, mental, spiritual colonizer? This is something you have to ask for yourself. The more you do this, and the more you become aware of God, the turner of the hearts, the director of our paths, and the more you find that he opens the doors for you, door after door to the straight path. Something that is there, God is most near, but you have to open that window, remove the ego, so that the truth can start to penetrate into your heart, your mind, your conscience, and become victorious of whatever is in there. So I've mentioned this more than once in the past in different type of descriptions. And so I hope this was more clear now. And I will be putting it on my Faith Reflections channel. I appreciate your support, feedback, and prayers. Any corrections, feel free to add them directly on my page, and I will respond to them. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.